Welcome to What Lies Ahead. I'm your host, Chris Ruffini, lead singer of the Long Island band Overthrow. On my podcast, I explore everything related to the hardcore scene through the eyes of artists, promoters, and record labels. As always, please like or subscribe on all social media platforms. What do a killer kangaroo, a coffin, and coffee have in common? No clue, but our friends at Knockbox Coffee are running with it, and somehow it works. From Long Island, Knockbox has a bigger vision, fueling creativity and giving back to the punk, hardcore, metal, emo, and underground scenes. Every band sold helps fund independent bands, shows, and festivals. Their one and only Killer Kangaroo blend is grown in volcanic soil within distance of the Amazon rainforest, sun-dried for 7 days and roasted in small batches in the US. Expect fruit notes and a dark finish, darker than your average medium. And it's grown and treated environmentally friendly. If you're tired of regular old blends, throw a punch at the ordinary. Try the Killer Kangaroo blend today. Give them a follow on Instagram at knockbox.coffee and get a bag of the blend at www.knockbox.shop. Now, on to the show. Today, I'm joined by Chris Enriquez, the drummer behind bands Orange 9mm, Spotlights, and his newest project, BEINN. Chris is also performing with Clockwise, Era Type 11, and the legendary On the Might of Princes, to name a few. Beyond performing, Chris has made a major impact off stage. He is the marketing director at New Noise magazine, and he's been deeply involved in the New York scene for years, booking shows and building communities. We're going to talk about his journey through all these different chapters and what is in store for the future. Chris, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for taking the time to write all that. I really, really appreciate it. And what you do is super, super generous for the scene and everything. So it's an honor to be here.
Much appreciated, and likewise. And this is super fun, and for sure, we've been talking. It definitely was someone I want to have on. We were talking about this before. You check all the boxes in terms of things that I would love to talk about on a
Thank
podcast.
you.
You
Thank you.
magazine, drums. You promoted shows back in the day, and even today, for recording this, you were in the studio. You had a studio session. Um, you handle things so balanced. I don't know how you do it. I really don't. You're super busy, but you just come across and you could tell like you genuinely love and enjoy what you're doing.
Thank you for noticing and saying that. I grew up on Long Island, as you know, and I can kind of start by maybe mentioning a few things because it's really growing up in Manhasset that sort of made me this way because it was such a tough town to grow up in, and especially in the time that I was around. And we're talking like, the 80s and 90s. It was very hard to be different and into music, which was sort of just like something that came natural to me. And anyone in Long Island might know this if you're listening and you're not from Long Island. Manhasset is like a pretty like exclusionary town. It's almost like the Hamptons or something, right? So like there's a very sort of Truman Show, about it where everybody's the same and like God forbid you're a little different. Especially back then, violence was like a very real thing. So I would just constantly get the shit kicked out of me for being into like some silly shit. Like I'd wear a Metallica shirt to get the crap beaten out of me, like walking down the street like that. So um, finding a community, building communities, going out of my way to connect with people through art, which is very therapeutic. Obviously music is art. That's sort of just become my life. And luckily, you know, that passion hasn't gone anywhere. So, into my 40s, it's still something that really means a lot to me. And so that's kind of like why I still go out of my way to be part of all this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. So art obviously continues along. And you said yourself you wore a Metallica shirt back in the day, which we all did. Still love Metallica to this day, but like we all had those, right? Those Metallica shirts and stuff back then.
Right.
So where did your love for music come from? And how did you end up behind the drums starting to play?
Yeah. I remember this is gonna sound so cliche being that we're from Long Island, but I'm not even making this up. Like I remember hearing like Billy Joel 7 inches. And I was on the North Shore where he was from. I had a piano teacher that my parents made me go to that would talk to me about like early Billy Joel, not Billy Joe, Billy Joel performances, at like local pubs. So like I just remember hearing music in the house, and that stood out to me. And I found it to be something that I just enjoyed more than like sports and other things that like people would try to get me into, and it felt like something that I was able to do naturally, almost without too much guidance. Like I'm sure a lot of people could say the same about anything, like I got really good at football one day, or whatever. And I think drums for me just sort of like every kid wants a drum set, right? But
Mm.
this is a funny story. My father uh, took me to Disneyland, and he had a friend, a coworker, whose son was kind of like a Tommy Lee character. And this is in the '80s, so like he introduced me to this kid who was probably like 10 years older than me. And he had a room with a drum set in it and just '80s metal posters everywhere. And he let me play his drum set, showed me a few beats, and that just really resonated with me. So it was really glam metal, actually. Like MTV
Mm.
and glam metal was what got me into music. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. My first real album was "Girls, Girls, Girls" from Motley Crue. That was my
Yeah,
first.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're in your 40s today, that's sort of what we were
Yeah.
exposed to. Whether you were 5 or 10, that was what was on TV and on the radio.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So from there, you're obviously as you're getting older, and you move on from glam rock, even though it never leaves you in a way, but you move on from it. You're probably getting into metal and moving forward. Where did your interest start getting into hardcore?
Hardcore, I would just simply say, well, okay, two things. I was going to say Nirvana, but it was actually before that. I have a sister who is, I think she's like 8 years, yeah, she's 8 years older than me. And she moved to New York City in like the mid '90s, early '90s, or something like that. Well, she was a club kid at Limelight, and she would meet a lot of eclectic people. She was dating a guy that would come over, and he always had some obscure band T-shirts. It would be like I remember Misfits: A Legacy of Brutality. One day he was wearing, another day he was wearing like a Butthole Surfers shirt, um, and um, and he had like cool cassettes and mixtapes, and I remember seeing those, and it had like the Cramps, and it was everything from like the Cramps to like Fugazi and Bad Brains, and I would hear this stuff and I just could tell that it was different from Skid Row or Girls, 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 and that sort of thing. So I was intrigued. And then, of course, when Nirvana came out, I think that it was easier to find stuff. I'd go to Tower Records, and people were more interested in carrying underground music, and that's where I bought a lot of my first punk records. And that was before I even saw like my first hardcore show. But at that point, I remember getting Bad Brains live on cassette tape, Fugazi Repeater on cassette tape, Misfits, The Cramps. Like so, I was kind of just like buying whatever looked cool or what I had heard about or saw, in some shape or form, like in an image, whether it was a skate magazine or something of that nature. And then an older kid in high school knew General George from Clockwise.
Mm.
That was between him and this other kid that I became friends with, who had an older brother that was in a band with Richie from Sick of It All, the first bass player. These were like older folks that sort of um, through skating and other things that I was into at the time, they would pass down sort of knowledge. And this guy that knew General George brought me to PWAC, and that was in like '94. And I saw Avail with Warped Weeble Wobbles and Bad Trip and Garden Variety.
Which one?
So that was my
Yeah,
first local foray into like the local hardcore scene. Yeah.
cool. And then it probably went from there, just weekend after weekend, I would assume, right? You just started to go from
Constantly
there.
every day, yeah. And then like the as far as the city was concerned, like the kid that I knew, his older brother was in a band with Richie from Sick of It All. He had just quit Sick of It All and started a band called Reach. I think they were on like the
Yeah.
516 comp. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, he's the guy that he's the guy that played Clobber in Time, the bass player on that. So the older brother guy, Renee, took me to see Helmet one day around the same time that I saw that Avail show at PWAC, and that was like the Scratch the Surface era. It was Helmet, Betty, with Sick of It All opening Scratch the Surface tour. So like I think that was 94, 95. So those two shows basically are what opened me up to all this like underground shit. And then I was just hooked because I hated my town. So every weekend I would,
Place to go.
whatever flyer I had, I was there. I didn't even know the bands that I was going to see. I would just go. It was Bouncing Souls, never heard of them. Gonna go see it. You know what I mean? Like Lifetime, don't know what that is, but I'm going to be there. So that's kind of what happened. It opened the floodgates.
And saw so many amazing shows, I'm sure, along the way. So you're playing drums at that point. Now, when did the idea come? I want to play in a band or start to play. Like, when did that kind of start moving along with? Did that kind of happen? Did that happen for you a little bit after these shows, or you were kind of you weren't even thinking it at that point? You were just enjoying going to shows and checking out
Yeah,
these.
yeah. I mean, so that was what was really cool for me because I had an advantage once I got into the scene. I had already been playing in bands from the age of, maybe 9 or 10. Once I got into Metallica and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff, I started playing in cover bands, and we would play at like, local fairs in our hometown and shit like that, like playing
Mhm.
Megadeth covers, Metallica covers, whatever we could learn, and then, once I got into punk and hardcore, I shifted in terms of like what I wanted to play. And I would say, I went from metal to grunge and then into sort of, and then I was influenced by hardcore. So whatever like grunge music I was playing, the hardcore scene definitely had an impact on how I approached what I was doing. It was a band called Fall with Grace. Uh,
Mhm.
we played a lot of shows in like the mid 90s with like when Movie Life started, and the Strider was a band that we played with a lot. Era Type 11 was pretty new at that point, and Inside was very active. So that was that era of Long Island hardcore that my band Fall with Grace started to uh, get to know, the players, the promoters, and figure out how to get on shows and how that sort of community worked so that we could be part of it.
Mhm. How long had that been last for?
That band was around, I would say, from probably like 1991 to like 1997, like 1996 or something like that. So it was like 5 years.
Okay.
And it didn't really go anywhere. It was a local band. Nobody really like went. I mean, I guess there were bands that like went places, but they were older than us, so like we were not able to, do much outside of like go play at Deja One or Ground Zero or some random practice space in Lindenhurst. You know how it was back then.
Yeah.
And,
Did
yeah.
Fall of Grace play the PWAC? Did you ever get? Did you ever?
No, we did play the Roxy in Huntington, which was
What
funny.
a
So it was so
classic
weird.
place, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was really weird because I have memories like we were not hardcore, but we got on bills with like 25 to Life. Back then it was just random. There'd be like 12 bands. I remember Planet
The
Freak.
Sunday shows, those matinees.
Yeah, we would play
Yeah.
shows with like Cypher and Planet Freak, and then maybe like I remember we played with Sons of Abraham. Like it was really weird, but we didn't fit in. We were a three-piece, all Asian, like grungy post-hardcore band.
Uh,
Like,
uh.
really, really stood out at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if there's any bands I missed, you obviously let me know here because I want to try and encapsulate everything that you've done here. So you've played, and you play in so many incredible bands from Orange Nine to On the Might of Princes, Spotlights, obviously, which is went on to like some cool tours with like Bungle and Quicksand and Deftones and that Corn Faith No More tour, right? When you guys on a show or you couldn't
Oh,
were going to do
well,
that, and then
that was
COVID.
actually, yeah, the COVID thing happened. We were supposed to do an arena tour
Were
with
you on that Barclays Center
tour.
show? Because I was going to go to that. So
It was that tour, but we actually chose to do the West Coast when they asked us because we just felt like it would have benefited the band more to get exposure of that
mhm, mhm.
magnitude on a different coast, as much as we would have liked to like have that moment where we could tell friends and family, "Hey, we're playing at Barclays." But as you mentioned, like the COVID thing happened, and then it was never rescheduled. So that was like probably the most devastating like
That would be great.
blow if I had to like think back about like something shitty that happened, which there's a lot of things, but to have even been in the conversation is obviously like very, very cool. So I'm glad that we were in the conversation, you know?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
cool, and I'm a big Faith No More guy, so I was like, "Oh," so that got, obviously it had to because of what was going on, but
Yeah.
you have Ben now. This is another new band that you with Artie from Mind of Matter and Error Type 11 with, so which is such a cool, like it reminds me of like Radiohead alt rock. It's just like I got a cool. You do so many different things with the music, and the more we're talking here and hearing your background in music, it makes sense to be quite honest. Like it's cool that you do that. So I'm going to do it this way. I'll hand it to you here because there's so many different projects. How did like we could kind of compartmentalize each of these bands here. How did each of these projects come about, with you? Like, and obviously these are all different eras here we're talking about, but let's talk a little bit about that. And then get into how you multitask all of it because it's
Yeah,
incredible.
of course, of course. Well, I mean, since you mentioned Ben, Artie Shepherd, from Mind Over Matter and Aerotep 11, he was a guy that I looked up to growing up, and he was in the band Bad Trip at the first show that I saw that I was talking about. So from the first moment that I saw a Long Island hardcore show, he was there. And that
Sure.
show was a very interesting one for me because, as you know, and probably a lot of your listeners, like the Long Island hardcore scene had different eras and but it's also very diverse, you know what I mean? So in the 90s, even though you had things like Neglect and more of those sort of heavier bands that were playing, there were also these shows where you could see a band like Garden Variety on the same bill
Yeah.
as Mind Over Matter. So he was always a huge influence because coming from the grunge thing and then coming into hardcore, what he did with Mind Over Matter and Air Type 11 really spoke to me because I think it was like the hardcore ethos and the sort of just the lifestyle that really attracted me, and of course the music. But then on a more artistic side, what he was doing with his bands was certainly outside of the box. Like as much as we liked Sheer Terror and Neglect, there was something about Mind Over Matter that was different than that. That was really refreshing for someone
Yeah.
like me.
Incredible.
So
Mhm.
um, the first chance I got to become friends with him, we were both living in Brooklyn at the time. He was bartending in Greenpoint and eventually started St. Vitus. So him and I, just naturally as Long Island people, sort of gravitated to each other because we had something to talk about. And we started a band called Primitive Weapons that we toured with
Oh,
and
yeah.
did stuff for a few years. That sort of imploded, but our chemistry always kind of felt like really aligned. And recently he decided to start this band. And Ben, originally the drummer, was Jeff Gensterbloom, who is in Coalesce now and Casket Lottery. So he moved, and Small Brown Bike. He moved out of Brooklyn recently to join Coalesce, and he lives in Kansas. So then I
Mm.
took his place, and this record that's coming out, he actually played on, and then I'm now here to sort of help tour and work on the next one eventually. But Artie is such a prolific guy, and when Jeff left, he asked me if I could make time for it, and he's one of those guys that I'm never going to say no to because I just owe
Mhm.
so much to him, and I love what he does. So you know it's a cool full circle moment. And, even though he's a friend of mine, every time I see him, I still see someone that I feel is a legendary
Yeah.
person that I'm honored to know. So, yeah, that's the story behind Ben. And then,
It's really good, by the way. Singles
thank
you put
you.
out and the other stuff I heard is it's really good.
I really
Really,
appreciate that,
really,
man.
really good. Yeah, it's got. I like the sound is really, really good.
It has the Long Island vibe, even though we've been sort of gone for a while, it's in
Mhm.
us and it doesn't go away. So it has that vibe. But yeah, and then Spotlights is my main band.
Mhm.
Spotlights is a really funny story that um, basically it's a married couple. They moved to Brooklyn from San Diego, started this band, went through, maybe two or three drummers. Drummers are hard to come across. I think anyone in
Yeah.
a band knows that. They leave, they play in too many bands, I'm guilty of that. So they just couldn't hold down a drummer. And St. Vitus, I would go there all the time and they played a show and I was blown away. someone introduced me to them. They had a drummer at the time, so it wasn't like I was trying to feel them out. It was just a genuine sort of like, wow, you guys are sick. And this sort of life-changing moment happened one day where Deftones offered them a tour, and it was Deftones refused asking Spotlights to tour with them. Totally like out of like a sort of bizarre chain of events. So if anyone listening knows the band ISIS, I'm sure you've heard of ISIS. Yeah. The drummer of ISIS was the drum tech for Deftones for a few years. And he was also in a band with Chino called Palms, and they're on Ipecac, which is Mike Patton's record label from Faith No More. So he's like taking the drums down one day on tour with Deftones, and he's listening to Spotlight because he's friends with them. And Chino just walks by, right time, right place,
It's
and
how it is, though, right? Sometimes, right? Yeah.
yeah, and he just goes, "What are you listening to? This is great." And Aaron from ISIS is just like, "Oh yeah, it's my friend's band. It's a couple from San Diego. They're called Spotlights." Chino doesn't really make any mention of the fact that the next day he's gonna try to find out who we are and have his manager reach out to the band. So Mario and Sarah, the couple that I'm referring to, get an email from a booking agency. They almost deleted the email too, and because it was vague, but it was somebody from William Morris, so they knew, you know, that it was a real agency, but it was just strange. They thought it was like a pay to play situation. Uh,
Yeah.
Long story short, the agent said a very big American rock and roll band would like to, or American rock band would like to take you on tour this summer for 3 weeks. Are you available? And um, and they kind of like sarcastically respond, "Yeah, okay, sure, yeah, we're available to tour the big American rock band or whatever." And they didn't think much of it. And then maybe 3, 4 weeks later, they got the offer. It was Deftones and refused. And then their drummer at the time couldn't do a 3 week tour. So he did 1 week, and then I did the remaining 2 weeks. But the funny thing is, I actually said no because they couldn't tell me. At first, I said no because they wouldn't tell me who the bands were that they were opening for, and I was so disillusioned by all the bands I had played in at that point in my life. On the Might of Princes sort of um, basically broke up, and my singer passed away, and then Primitive Weapons broke up, and we toured a lot. And I was 36 years old, and just like, I can't do this. I gotta be an adult. So I said no, and then they told me who the tour was with, and it was really funny because I immediately was like, "Oh, you know what? I spoke too soon. Let me talk to my boss." And so they still make fun of me for saying that to this day. But so I ended up doing the tour, and then we got signed to Ipecac like shortly after that tour, and now I'm just playing in bands all the
Yeah.
time.
That's a great record. That's a great record, that one you're referring to for Spotlights. Let me ask you, so for the 3 weeks, you may have said this, I'm sorry. Did you go out the full 3 weeks or you met them after the week?
I met them after the week. I watched the
Okay.
other drummer play like a show or two so I could like get acclimated into that weird life that I was about to walk into. And then my first show with Spotlights was opening for Deftones. There was no like club or like small show or a warm up. Like I just went right into the fire. It was the Stone Pony at Asbury Park in first show
Wow.
with the band, and then that was it. It's like really crazy.
That's cool.
Um,
That's
yeah,
really cool. Like, you think
yeah.
back of, like, how it happened for them and how you got involved, and then look, it's been ever since, right?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I would say like it has definitely made me appreciate like being able to play still because um, you know a big opportunity like that doesn't come every day, but also it really humbles you because when those opportunities do come, you do realize when it's over that like everyone was there to see the headliners, and the real work starts when you're back on your own again. So we do really try to work hard and remind ourselves that we have to have dedication and go out on the road and do all these things, which it only gets tougher as you get older. But I think we just know that it's what we want to do. So we're still doing it. You know, that was 10 years ago, which is crazy.
Crazy,
And it
right?
really flew by. 9 years ago. Yeah, yeah.
You have a tour. This will be out in December. You have a tour starting in the new year, right? You guys are going out for a little while.
Yes, we're doing Europe for from January 27th to February 28th. And it's with a band with an artist named A. Williams. She's kind of like a doomy sort of shoegaze
Mhm.
artist from the UK. But yeah, just been road dogging it, man. And to answer your question, it's like it's scary, man. Like I had like corporate jobs, and you know I was gonna go back to what you were saying earlier, like how do I balance all this stuff and make it happen? Like um honestly, like had all these corporate jobs working in ad sales and you know, I did the whole suit and tie thing, and I just wasn't made for that. And I know that sounds pretentious, but like it I found myself, you know, if I'm gonna be honest with you, I did more drugs and drank more and did more fucked up shit to myself when I was working a suit and tie
You're
9 to
working a
5.
9 to 5,
Not
yeah.
when I was playing in a rock band. So I just you know I sort of like took a big gamble and decided to quit my day job one day, and I'm just hustling, you know. So like I'm
You are.
during the daytime, I sell ads for a music publication called New Noise, and then and it's remote, and my boss is really cool. So if I'm you know, getting a drum session where I can get paid to record on someone's record, you know, I do a lot of like strangers, you know, will reach out to me, or I'll you know I'll find ways to get myself into conversations. I'm able to work my day job around that and then still live my life and travel if I have to. But you know, it is a hustle because you know very well, like I do, it's expensive to live in New York.
Mm,
So I just have to. That's why I have to work because I have to. If I'm paying my bills through this, I just can't sit still. So I've
right.
kind of just like made it. I've normalized it, and I think you just have to have some perspective sometimes, no matter what it is that you do, to kind of realize that everything is a job, and if you enjoy it, you're really lucky to be doing it. Because I can say like a lot of my friends don't love their jobs and they do what they
Mhm.
have to do. So you know, I try not to complain and just sort of work as hard as possible and maintain my sanity. You know what I mean?
You clearly do. It's obvious that you're enjoying what you're doing, because which is obviously important to like to your point. One band we were getting into each one that I wanted to talk about. And then I wanted to talk about your drum style and stuff in a moment because each band's different. But we're talking the Mighty Princess. It's I had Rachel on here. It was such a great conversation that was on here. We were talking about that before, and I feel like you guys honor him so well with how you guys go about with these reunion shows, and she fits so well. She does such a great job with it, and you guys have really perfectly married like that. In terms of honoring his legacy and how she comes in as well at the same time. So, which is no one must be it was like a difficult probably thing. Okay, it was like a reunion to come back and
Right.
and for an honor of the album, but you guys really do a great job of that. You really
Thank
really do.
you. Thank
Mhm.
you. I love that episode that you did with didn't both of
Mhm.
you guys take turns singing
Sky Keep
Sky
Falling.
Came Falling? I
Yeah,
think I saw
yeah.
footage of that, and I remember the yeah, like Chris couldn't be there. Yeah, that was really cool to see on Instagram when
She
they
killed it that night. She was
oh.
great. I joked with her. I'm like, I have to follow this. I was like, I have to follow her. Like after this, she was so good. She was great. She's the
Oh
best. She
man.
really
Well,
is.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not easy to like replace a front person no matter what, even if they're alive. You know what I mean? Which you know many bands have attempted at that, and we got really lucky. She's awesome. She's from the same scene, from the same place. It certainly helped that we knew her from a band back in the day that like self-admittedly was very influenced by us. So it was sort of a no-brainer. We're like, oh,
Mhm,
Rachel
mhm.
like spent years in a band, you know, trying to sound like us, and she was always like a really close friend of ours, still to this day. And it was really no question when we decided to do that, like who would be the good person. So I'm grateful that like people welcomed it and actually showed up and weren't like, I don't want to see this. It really felt like, and I'm sure there's some people that are like, I'm good. It would be hard, for example, like, God forbid this whatever happened, but like, I wouldn't want to see Silent Majority with a different singer. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to see Clockwise with a different singer. So, I think we just got super fucking lucky that she was able to come right in and knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
So it was a home run, and so grateful that she does this with us. So thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
lot of
but
good.
yeah, it's important. It's an important part of like your history in music. Obviously, is that band. That band's got a major legacy, and it's really cool what you guys are doing now. It is. Um, Orange Nine. Let's talk a little bit. So you guys at the Rack
Yeah,
with GB. You guys did that was awesome. It was a great
you
show.
were there.
Yes.
Oh, I wish we got to.
Yeah, yeah, we was. I can't. My son, my 15-year-old, he loved it too. I mean, every
Oh,
band,
does he like hardcore?
Headshot,
That's awesome.
GB were just incredible that night.
That's funny. I just somebody came up to me yesterday and said their friend's son was stage diving and showed me footage, and I think there was a band of people that were like 16, 17 that opened for us. Um, Orange Nine
Yeah, Deadshot.
happened.
Yep.
Deadshot, yeah, shout out to Deadshot.
Yeah.
Um, so I wonder if how in depth I should get into this. I mean, it's a podcast, so I'll just go for it. Like when I was having some like really difficult times with like drugs and alcohol, um, Gavin Van Vleck from Burn, which is Chaka's old band, Chaka from
Mhm.
Orange Nine, he was extremely helpful to, he owns a Muay Thai gym. They do, um, all sorts of stuff, jujitsu, Muay Thai, and all that shit. And when I was having a really hard time at that point in my life and meetings and things like that that weren't working out for me, it was Muay Thai that helped me sort of overcome a lot of those struggles that I was having. And after getting to know him, at some point, Burn got back together and they had a different drummer like every 6 months. So I played this one show at Tompkins Square Park with Burn, and I had
Okay.
already known Chaka for a little bit, not too well, just from having moved out here. I used to go to this place in the city called Lit, and Chaka and Sergio Vega would always be DJing there, and I would just go up to him and fan out, like ask him, questions about Orange Nine and Burn and Quicksand and shit. So anyway, after I played that one show with Burn, there were some talks of Orange Nine getting back together, and I didn't know, if it would be the original members, and I was really like kind of punishing the guy to get my name in the hat. And eventually, he decided that it would be cool to play some shows. Civ hit him up to do a show with Into Another at the New York City Tattoo Convention. And so we did that show. It went really well. And then we just kept it moving from there. And, we're writing some shit and we're trying to honor
It's
the
cool.
legacy and then continue the story there.
So that's awesome. So with all that, how do you adapt your drumming style? Because every one of the from On the Mind Princess to Spotlights to Ben to Orange Nine, there it's different, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little different. How do you go about adapting your drum style to each song? It's just more about you hear the music and then you put what's over it. Like how do you go about that? Or you put yourself in that space of that band?
That too. I mean, there's a few things. For one thing, I think it really helped that I grew up learning how to play drums to cover songs. And I had a really quick transition of the types of music that I was into. Like, one minute I was into classic rock, the next minute I was into metal, the next minute I was into punk, and then hardcore, and then it just kept evolving. So I kind of like always had an eclectic sort of um, taste in music as I grew up, and then in the way that I would play, I would always try to sort of evolve along with like sort of how things were moving along. That being said, like I also am a fan of a lot of these bands. Like I was a fan of On the Might of Princes before I joined.
Mhm.
I played on all the records except for the first one. I was a fan of Spotlights before I joined. Same with Orange Nine. So it just so happens that like every almost every band I've ended up in, I've had to sort of like assimilate into like
Mm,
whatever that role is. And the way that I look at it, it's like almost like a brand in a way. Like if you show up to work at like Urban Outfitters or if you show up to work at Supreme, um, there's something expected of you to uphold the brand, right? So I kind of look at bands that way, where it's like Orange 9mm is like a hip hop influenced hardcore
mm,
band with like alternative leanings. And as a fan, um, I feel like I understand where they're coming from and how to insert myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother, right? So like
right.
I wouldn't try to be in like Refused or something. I mean, maybe I would, but like a better example, like I wouldn't try out for Dillinger Escape Plan. I love Dillinger Escape Plan, but I look at that brand and I'm like, I don't know how to contribute to that. I can't
Mm,
fit myself into those clothes, like
mm.
if I tried even harder than I usually try, I still wouldn't be able to. So you kind of have to pick and choose your battles, and I take it seriously because I think about what a fan would want to see or
Mm.
hear if
And
they're
you
going
have
to
that
see.
perspective, which is cool.
Yeah, like
Had that perspective.
if I had to play in the Cro-Mags or something, like I would, do my best to study Mackie and be like,
Mhm.
how do I, he's one of the greatest of all time, right? But like, I feel like you have to do that if you're going to join a band and try to carry on whatever it is they were doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, yeah.
That's a really cool way to look at it, and it's clearly helping you out with how you're doing it. So that's
Thanks,
awesome.
man.
No, it is, it
um,
is. And you're playing this should be coming out either before or right after, but you're playing the Clockwise reunion too, right?
Yeah. As
Yeah,
you're
so
saying all this stuff, I'm like starting to be like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Because
you're
it's a
doing a
lot
lot.
of bands.
Yeah,
So clockwise,
it must be pretty cool from look at the beginning story that you talked about with hardcore getting into it, and now you're playing the reunion show. It's probably pretty it's that's awesome.
yeah, I really love those people in that particular scene. So like Clockwise, Silent Majority, Mind Over Matter. Those people were so nice and welcoming. I mean, like you get your balls busted by a lot of these guys, but like, but they were also very nurturing. General George and Eddie Reyes had a lot of influence on me growing up, not just musically, but as human beings.
Mhm.
As older human beings. So their music and their whole vibe is something that I'm like very influenced by, and I'm just stoked to play with those guys. That music
Yeah.
is like in my like DNA, like all that shit. You know what I mean? So it's gonna be a lot of fun. And Eddie and I were in a band together uh, right before Taking Back Sunday that not many people know about,
Oh,
and it was right when I joined On the Mighty Princes, and then when he joined Taking Back Sunday. It was a band called Runner Up, and Justin Sturdy from Millhouse played guitar. Eddie Reyes, who was in every band at the time, played guitar, and then it was me, and we had two guys that were not from Long Island, but it was very much the band that eventually turned into Taking Back Sunday. We did a tour with Silent Majority. It was a weekend. I mean, I'm calling it a tour, but we did a weekend with Silent Majority right before they broke up, and we played in North Carolina. And Adam from Taking Back Sunday, before he joined the band and moved to Long Island, was there. And I remember
wow.
us meeting him. And then when I quit Runner Up, um, they started Taking Back Sunday. And then eventually he became the singer. And by that point, I was in On the Mic. So I haven't played with Eddie Reyes. I haven't played music with him since 1997,
Wow.
which is 28 years ago, right? Yeah.
Super full circle,
Fucking
right? So
insane. Yeah.
what now this is November, we're recording this. When's that first rehearsal date?
You're gonna laugh, but the show is December 6th, and we're rehearsing December 4th and 5th.
Oh, so it's like prime ready to go. You'll be yeah,
Just
that
gonna, yeah, we just have to jump in, and the lineup is wild. It's Gary Bennett, from
he's the
New
best.
Idols on
Gary's the
bass.
best. Mhm.
Yeah, because he was on he was in the band for a while, and then Eddie, Phil from Type 11, General George. I think that it's just the drummer. that they never really kept in touch with. So, that's where I kind of come in, I guess.
That's good. Yeah, that's gonna be super fun. That's gonna be awesome. So,
Yeah.
but I wanted, I guess, to talk. You mentioned it a little bit before, but want to talk about your work with New Noise Magazine as a marketing director. But before that, was there any other magazines you worked for or experiences that you had related to what you're doing prior to New Noise?
Yes. 11 years ago, I started working at Revolver magazine, and that was uh, my first time working in the music industry outside of like sort of like DIY situations. You know, office job, 9 to 5, selling advertising and doing all sorts of sponsorships for events and things of that nature. And so that really thrusted me into a completely different world of music, right? So I'm going from like booking shows at Local 7 and Ground Zero, to working on marketing campaigns for like a new Ozzy record and having meetings with Sony and shit like that. So it was like a huge jump for me. And I was at that company for 10 years. And in that time, we had switched owners 4 or 5 times. So at one point, Revolver and Guitar World were the same company. At other points in my career, I was also working um, at a company that owned Revolver, Alternative Press, and Brooklyn Vegan. And then at one point, I left for I think 6 or 7 months and worked at Loudwire. Came back. We owned the Hard Times for like 3 years, so then I was working with the Hard Times as well. I left the company earlier this year and decided to work for New Noise because it was a much more comfortable place for me to be as I am continuing to tour and do a lot of my freelance stuff. And it just sort of like is an easier thing for me to be a part of. And yeah, and I'm reviewing your new record in our
Yeah,
next call.
yeah. You have so much to do, and you have to do. You're doing that, so
I will be reviewing the new Overthrow record in the next
that's
issue.
cool, man. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Yes, that's awesome that you're doing that, and it's a great magazine too. You guys have it does it has everything in there. So what's cool is you kind of talked about it. Like, is it day to day basis, or it's kind of when because you guys put out what monthly? It's like a monthly magazine, right? That you guys put out.
6 times a year, so every other month.
6, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So 6 times. So, is there a constant day-to-day basis stuff where there's preparation and planning or just with the 6 month every other month or 6 times or whatever it is, it provides you the opportunity to really look at what you guys are putting out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the hustle that we sort of go through to maintain a magazine that's out every other month, on top of having a website that's updated every day and socials and all that stuff is a mixture of various things. I mean, like we luckily like people email us like publicists letting us know, hey, I work with, Pure Noise Records or I work with Nuclear Blast Records or Century Media. So we get these like advance notice copies of records sent to us to check out, to review, and opportunities to do interviews and different types of things and premieres. And then at that point, we have to identify 4 artists that are going to be on our front cover every 6 months. So every time we come out with a new issue, it's the same magazine when you open it up. It's the same stories and the same, table of contents and all that. But the front cover is 4 different artists, depending on which one you get. So that's a way for us to represent different genres in the underground, and we really do our best to honor new bands and legacy bands. Over the past few months, we've had everyone from Biohazard to Scowl to End It, and Speed, and even I'm trying to think about any other bands that we've had that were like anyway, like we have alternative bands and even goth bands and stuff like that. So it's just the underground, you know what I mean? And that's really what matters the most to us is the underground. So it's like as much as we want to, as much as people at RCA might want us to put Sleep Token on the front cover of our magazine, we know that there's a million other media outlets that are going to be talking about Sleep Token. We'd
Mm-hmm.
rather have Ended on the front cover you know what I mean, or speed or something that resonates with what we think is like important in underground culture that needs to be exposed on a level that Sleep Tokens playing Radio City Music Hall, like they don't need our help. You know what I mean? We'd rather help bands out that we can kind of expose, or legacy bands that we can honor, for making it possible to have a scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and you guys do a great job of that. It's clearly, it's if you anyone has looked at the magazine or read online or whatever the case is, you clearly see that with New Noise. Question for you is,
Yeah.
so you're going to be gone for about a month next year, and then we also didn't mention you doing a weekend with Orange 9 millimeter. Yeah, some other stuff coming. There's a bunch of things
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on, prior to that going. So when you're gone in Europe for the month, it sounds like what you're doing with New Noise, you could, while you're on the road in Europe, you can do this work while you're on the road.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a real blessing that like a lot of I mean, obviously like what happened in 2020 was awful, but a lot of remote jobs opened up, and just the open-mindedness about that. That was like the one good thing that came from all of that mess. So yeah, I go on the road as long as I deliver, you know what I mean? As long as I make sure that we're making money. That's really my job at the end of the day is I'm the person that has to make sure that we have advertisers, sponsors for our events, and our podcast. And as long as we're making ends meet and I'm delivering that, it's like a no questions asked situation. So I've really gotten lucky with that sort of trust, And it's easy to tell if I'm not doing my job or not based on how much money's coming in, so they know.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So what you just described too, it's like what I'm hearing is like never a chance to be complacent with something like that. It's like even if you land a big band or something that you're like really excited about, a big ad, or you get something in there. Okay, it's good for that moment. You could enjoy it for that second, but then it's on to the next, right? You got
It
in a good
really
way
is.
to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, and time moves really quickly when you're living a life like that. But at the same time, it keeps it exciting. You know what I mean? I'll tell you this, man. Like there have been times in my life where I would be lying if I didn't stop and say like, Man, like, should I have had a more conventional life where I don't have kids. I have a wife, and she's very supportive, and we've really sort of enjoyed a life together where we get to travel and like enjoy music, and we have that in common. But like, I don't have that sort of same hustle that my friends have, where I go to my job in an office and then I have to go pick up my kids from school, and that sort of thing. And that becomes more apparent to me as I get older. But I think now that I've been doing this for so long, it's more of a reason for me to constantly think about ways to take what I do for a living and and improve on it every day. Come up with new
Mhm.
ideas. What's the next thing? When I showed up at New Noise, it was just a magazine. We didn't have a podcast. We didn't have events.
Right, you're doing that too. Yeah, yeah.
So I come up with these other ways of making money, but as we're making money, doing it in a way where we're working with cool people and good bands and doing something important for the culture. So yeah, I don't know if I just strayed away from the initial thing that you asked, but oh
No,
yeah,
you hit
right.
it.
I'm saying like so every day I'm just like sort of maintaining what's in front of me, but also trying to grow it at the same time.
It's cool, and that's exciting, right? It's got to be. It has
It
to be, right?
is, it
And
is. I
it,
mean,
sound,
look,
and it
yeah,
sounds it sounds that way the way you describe it.
definitely. I found a balance. I don't want to pretend like it was smooth sailing the entire time. I mean, I've had some really dark moments. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
having issues with substance abuse. Like, I did a lot of damage to myself during my time at Revolver, where I was sort of having a hard time, just like, you know, having a personality where I have to show up and do a dog and pony show, right? So like
Mhm.
I if I'm meeting a record label, for example, to try and pitch an idea to them that ultimately I'm trying to sort of monetize, I have to show up and have a pitch, and uh I have to have a certain personality where it's like, even with like the events we do, I do these events at Rough Trade, like this past Sunday, day after Halloween, I was pretty shot, but I had to go interview Thrice in front of 200 people at Rough Trade at 30
Saw
Rock.
that. Yeah.
Um, Great job. So grateful that I get to do that. But, it involves putting on a personality. I feel like a game show host when I get up there and I go, who's excited for Thrice? What's going on, everybody?
Yeah.
To pick up the new record. And I definitely signed up for that. But I think there was a moment in my life when I became very jaded. I didn't love every band I was interviewing, and there was a part of that that was a little soul sucking, and I think I was using a lot of uh, coping mechanisms. So it took a while for me to get into a place where it became smooth sailing. And while it's never perfect, I will say that I've finally gotten to a place where my perspective on everything as I age has helped me settle into it. And as you said, you mentioned that you could tell that that I enjoy what I do, and that I genuinely care about the things that I do. And um, I'm glad that you said that, because I would say that I definitely try to go out of my way to paint that picture, because it's part of helping me keep that perspective
Mhm.
by displaying that publicly, so that sort of the entire thing is pleasurable and not something I wake up and am bummed to do, because it does involve public facing and all that.
A
So
lot. You do a lot of that. Yeah, that's the whole other piece of it too. It's the podcast where it's cool. I saw the one with Max Cavalera. You had, Roger on, um, and two giants in my eyes. I love Sepultura, and obviously AF is AF, and AF is the best. And then you do, like you said, with Thrice, and you're doing that, yeah, that interviewing, but you come across very genuine with it, and I think that's why people are also comfortable going on your podcast, having you doing the interviews, and you get the most out of your guests, which is pretty cool.
thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, those guys changed my life, and
Mhm.
when I talk to them, it's like it's a podcast, but I'm genuinely interested in knowing about
Yeah.
their lives. Roger's life is insane. That talking to Roger from Agnostic Front is particularly interesting because he was living in squats, and that's like something that
Right.
you and I, as hardcore kids, we never lived in squat. I mean, maybe you did, I don't know, but I'm gonna guess
Mhm.
not. But so that's just super fascinating, and it's like it's very humbling to be like, Jesus, like you and Vinny, were in a hardcore band and played at CBGB's, but you and your friends were like living in abandoned buildings and like trying to panhandle for money in the street. So
Yeah.
those episodes are really special because I'm actually like really interested. And then Max, I'm always just interested in talking to him about like the style of music, because I when Roots and Chaos AD came out, those changed the way that I looked at metal. I mean, Pantera
I'm with you.
did too, but like I would say more so Sepultura. When I heard those records, I was like,
Chaos AD, I'm with you. That is,
what the fuck is this? This is insane. And
uh,
people have to remember that's like before Slipknot. Like nothing sounded like that. That shit happened. You know what I mean? So yeah. So thanks for listening to the episodes.
oh, no, that was great. I definitely listened to that one. So let's shift towards the promoting and booking shows back in the day. Always that's and again, it's like that's what's so cool about all the stuff you do is the band, you do the podcast, you have the magazine, and all this kind of stuff, and it's all interconnected in one way. So you book shows back in the like Local 7, Ground Zero. I wonder if you booked my band because we played Ground Zero a bunch of times, which was such a cool spot where like the Ataris played and Silent
Yeah.
Majority. I mean, it's like it was a little bar. It was a bar, you know. And so how did you get into doing that, booking
Well,
shows? What made you want to do that?
Mark Noyes from Two Man Advantage. This was also sort of connected through my friend whose older brother was in a band with Richie from Sick of It All. Like they were really tight with the Two Man Advantage guys. And Mark Noyes, I believe, was the first person to book shows at Deja One. Um,
Yes. Mhm.
so I indirectly met him, and he was super interested in having people help him out. So I offered to help him out with anything he needed, but also wanted to sort of like understand the logistics between booking shows. 'Cause I felt like it was hard to get shows, and if I didn't sort of take it into my own hands, then I would be like forever sort of like sitting around waiting for somebody
Mhm.
to like pick me. It's like you're like the last kid picked a dodgeball kind of thing, you know. I really wanted to be a part of what Silent Majority and Glassjaw and all those cool bands were doing, but I didn't know how to get noticed. So I figured if I just try to do it myself, maybe I can sort of be part of it indirectly and find a pathway through participating as opposed to like begging or hoping that they would notice, you know? So after I helped Mark with a few shows that he did at Deja, he let me book my own show. And I remember that show. I believe it was Movie Life, Fall with Grace, and maybe The Strider and maybe Inside, something like that. That was like a show that happened a lot every weekend when I
And
started.
that's and it was, and it's just funny if someone's hearing that, they're like, "What?" You know, but you're
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
that was a Friday, Saturday night, like, that happened a lot.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Once I noticed that the logistics were the same for the most part, bring a cash box, bring a stamper, and tally the number of people that are coming in so that you don't exceed the capacity. You know, if you should only be so lucky that the show draws that well, and then you know, how much do you owe the place that, whether it's a rental space or a bar, all those things, once they became normal for me, I started to sort of venture outside of Deja One. And I would ask the guy that managed Ground Zero if I could have a night for myself and book my own bands. And then that sort of like kind of had a snowball effect. And Local Seven, for better or worse, and when I say that, it's because, I was listening to the Tommy Corrigan episode, and like he was right. It was a weird time for Long Island hardcore, and I was definitely responsible for that venue. And I wouldn't say I was responsible for like the style of music that got popular during that time, because like the fashion core thing and all that stuff, I really didn't like that as much as any other person that was from back in the day. I felt like that was really the antithesis of what punk and hardcore and underground music was about, so I was pretty offended by all that shit. But those were the bands that were around, so when I was booking there, those were the types of bands that sort of came around that were drawing. So it kind of just happened that way. And the guy that I found, that Vince, who um, opened the doors to Local Seven for me to be in there, ended up being a super shady guy, which I didn't realize. And
Mhm.
so for better or worse, it was a time and place where a lot of bands played, and I booked My Chemical Romance in there. That was crazy. Had no idea who the fuck they were when that happened. I
It's
booked
crazy, right? Like,
Under Oath. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they
just
just
My
played.
Chemical Romance played there,
He
and,
played MetLife and headlined a stadium recently, like 2 days in a
yeah,
row or something. So, it had a cultural effect. I mean, Coheed played there. I booked them there. These are all bands that became massive that I didn't know were going to be massive at the time. But it was a weird time for hardcore. And looking back on it, not that I have any regrets, but I agree with a lot of people that have disparaging things to say about that venue and that time period. So apologies to anybody listening that hated that place. Sorry, guys. I was
nah, but
doing my
it was
best.
a big part of, what, of the scene at that point in time, so it was important. It was an
Yeah.
important time, absolutely. What made you stop? Is it when the place stopped booking shows, you stopped, or you just were touring, you just weren't into, just wasn't into doing it,
Well,
weren't
I
into doing it like consistently like that anymore?
I, I I continued to do it. I moved into the city. My transition from Long Island to the city kind of started when I was getting interested in different types of music. And bands were breaking up. The whole scene was changing. So I would say like,
Yeah, it definitely was at that time. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, like when On the Minor Princess started in 1997, I joined in 98. Silent Majority, we played shows with them. They broke up in 99. And then there were some cool bands, but then eventually, it became this whole like weird fashion core thing that was happening. And I was really so uninterested in that. So, and I wanted to move to the city anyway since I was a kid because I hated my hometown. So when I moved into the city, I took that as an opportunity to try experimenting in different types of bands and finding people that weren't from my hometown to play music with. And I started branching out. but I was still booking shows, and I was booking shows at places in Manhattan and the Lower East Side, and I kept doing that for a few years. I had a job working at various clubs around the city, but I really just wanted to be a performer. That was really like what I want. I wanted to be a drummer. I should say that first and foremost. Like I wanted to be a session player and play in as many bands as possible, regardless of what genre it was, and get paid to do that and be on stage. That was like really what I wanted to do for a living. So you know, eventually I got there through helping out bands, and that sort of goes along with my belief system. I think if you give back, I think if you give to a community, and you're genuine about it, and you look at it as an opportunity to make friendships and not coming at it as an opportunist, eventually you're going to find things to be a part of that are going to help you on your journey. So that was sort of like how I looked at it all, as I was sort of booking shows and trying to be part of something, you know?
Nah, it's cool, man. And actually, I have this question left for you, and then we'll end off with a bunch of questions that really have no rhyme or reason, and you just answer first thing that comes to mind. It doesn't, but you kind of said something there where you might have already answered the question, but I'm going to ask anyway. So you have some for younger musicians, or promoters, or someone who's interested in marketing, whatever the case may be. What advice would you give them to stay focused, inspired, and keep moving ahead, keep moving ahead? And also knowing that, look, whatever you're doing in your 20s, very rarely will you be at that place later on. Like typically there's a lot of movement and you have to move on and stuff like that. Very rarely, of course. But so what advice would you give them in staying focused and inspired in terms of if they're looking and doing multiple, like the performer, promoter, marketer kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. I should mention this too. Like, I do mentorships for kids at the Musicians Institute, as well. I've been to Hofstra as well, and talked to younger kids about this. And I actually have a side job where I teach 4-year-olds and 9-year-olds how to play music at my friend's school. So I also go out of my way as much as possible to speak to the youth and try to be some kind of an example or guiding light in these types of topics. The main thing I try to share with people is that once you get the fact that like being famous is not sort of, let me rephrase that. You shouldn't approach music or entertainment or anything of that nature with fame in mind, because if that's your goal and that's why you're there to do that, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be disappointed with the results. And that's actually not to discourage anyone, it's quite the opposite. I use examples when I speak on these topics, like working actors or working musicians, for example. They're not different than these jobs are not different from any other job, right? So you go see a play on Broadway and there's this, 10, 20 actors, but they're not Hugh Jackman and they're not Tom Cruise and they're not Nicole Kidman, right? But they're working and they're getting paid and they wake up and they collect their paycheck and they get, hopefully they have some insurance or something. And they're working. And to me, that should be the goal. If you are looking to work in the music industry or become a musician or any kind of entertainer for a living, I think that your goal should be, how do I pay my bills um, doing what I love to do? And once you respect it in the same exact way as you would at a desk job, in terms of the responsibility, showing up, working 5, 6 days a week, however many opportunities you get, you really have to make sure you don't drop the ball, be professional, and not treat it like a party, right? So that's the other thing. It becomes very hard to show up to a place where typically you might be there having some drinks with your friends or talking shit with your homies. If you want to work in an industry, any industry, you can't show up to your job and get wasted and start talking shit and being a jackass, right? So it applies to the music industry and it applies to being a working musician. So I would just offer that advice that, like, number one, Don't do it to become famous. If you do get famous, you got lucky. But if that's your goal, you are probably going to be disappointed. And number two, um, expect it to be a humble situation and realize that if you can make any money doing anything in the music industry, whether it's behind the scenes or as a performer, that again, you just have to treat it like any day job that you've ever had. Show up to work, be respectful, don't fuck up, and take as much work as you can. So
Mhm.
that's what I would share. I hope
No,
that,
it's awesome,
I
man.
don't know if that was too much.
Not at all. Not at all. It's awesome because it's important. A lot of what you described for people who are looking to do these things. Okay, so now I have a bunch of questions. First thing that comes to mind, you want to elaborate, obviously elaborate. So we talked a little bit about this. What's the favorite show you booked? Booked a lot of big bands, so you might have a few, but what's some favorite show you look back on? You're like, oh wow, I put that one together.
My God. I booked a show with this is a really tough question. I booked a lot of shows, but now that you're asking me on the spot, I'm like having a because thing is also like when I booked My Chemical Romance, I didn't know who they were. You know what I mean? And when I booked
Yeah.
Under Oath, I didn't know who they were. It was just like a coincidence. Oh, all right. This is gonna sound like a flex, and I can't believe it even like took me a second to even remember this. I booked Megadeth at St. Vitus.
That's awesome. Oh, you
Yeah,
did that one.
I
I
booked
remember
that
when they
show.
played that. That's
It was
great.
it,
Okay.
it was part of the Revolver Music Awards at Webster Hall that they headlined, and we had them play at St. Vitus under the name Vic and the Rattleheads.
I remember that.
And I worked that out with Webster Hall and St. Vitus, where we all went in, paid the guarantee, and did the whole thing. And they showed up and play. They didn't play like a full set, but they played like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever of like all the classics that you would want to hear. I think a few new
Right.
songs, but Megadeth at St. Vitus, I would have to
Cool
say
enough. That's a good one.
that.
You may have mentioned this prior when we were talking, but I'm going to ask anyway. It could be a couple, but your favorite tour you've ever been on?
My favorite tour that I've ever been on was probably the Deftones tour.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. They're also one of my favorite bands of all time.
Yeah.
Um,
New album's great.
it's oh God, yeah, it's so
Great.
good. It just changed my life. It's
Mm.
always going to be the tour that I think about when I think back to my career. And it just changed me as a human being. Like I learned all those things I just mentioned to you about like what to do and what not to do. For better or worse, I learned what to do and what not to do on that tour because
Mm.
I had moments where I was really fucked up and had to apologize, for getting too comfortable backstage and all the amenities and all that stuff. And I think that is the reason why I was able to get my shit together and be like, this is a job for these guys, and like this is a job for me, and I can't show up and be a jackass. But also just seeing Deftones every day, holy fucking shit, like
Oh, yeah.
and
Right.
refuse, yeah. So that would be my favorite tour.
Cool. Your top three albums of all time.
Probably Nirvana, Nevermind, because that just had a lot to
Changed
do with
everything,
like
right?
how I learned. Yeah, that's like my Beatles. Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye, because I just sort of never heard anybody scream like that until they were the first band I put on when I heard someone sing like that, and it was before I went to my first hardcore show, and I was just like, what the fuck? And I would say number three, probably. Uh, Fugazi Repeater.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Always go back to your youth, right? Like it's
Yeah, yeah, that changed how
real
I,
important.
like,
Yeah,
wrote
yeah.
music and, like, viewed music, like, never heard, like, music played like that, and it took a minute, it was very challenging. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then once it made sense, it really, like, changed everything for me, so, yeah.
Well, favorite scene outside of New York?
Washington, DC.
Mm.
The Discord, scene, Fugazi, Minor Threat, all that stuff. I think that the Discord scene had the most interesting bands that evolved from like the early hardcore scene to the sort of like indie rock scene that sort of stemmed from that. and it changed the world and how we all look at music. And ethically, I think that they really represented things that they upheld through history that not every scene can say. They were able to kind of Discord Records is still around, and they still have like the same ethos. You know what I mean? Um, I would say that scene, even though the New York scene musically, I think was the coolest scene because we have everything. But
Mm.
I think that we wouldn't sound the way that we did if it wasn't for the DC scene. So
Oh,
we owe it to them
oh,
in a way.
mhm. A band you wish you would have played with or shared a stage with. Not wish. I'm speaking about a past tense, but like a band you would like to that you haven't had an opportunity to do so yet.
Oh yeah, I mean, shit, man. I would love to go tour and play with why is it so hard for me to think about? I've been really lucky. You mentioned this show. We toured with the Melvins and Quicksand and Deftones and
Yeah.
Confused and Mr. Bungle, and we've been really really lucky. I would say that it would be really great to tour with like Smashing Pumpkins or something.
Well, it'd be cool.
Yeah, I feel like any of my bands would fit in really well with Smashing
Yeah,
Pumpkins.
and it's fun. As you said that, I could see Ben
Yeah,
playing with
exactly.
like, yeah, I could spotlights. I could easily see any. I could see any of those
Totally.
things.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm going Smashing Pumpkins.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, you may have just said it in the answer before, but I'll ask it anyway. Like I always say, I always do that. But a wow moment, a band that you played with.
A wow moment with a band
Quite
that
a
I
few
played
of them.
with
So,
where I was like, "Holy crap, what is this?" that I played with. Um, Fuck, man, this is really hard. Like a band that I played with and I was just like really impressed by. Oh my, like that no one heard of, or like any band.
any actually for any, it could be anything actually. That'll actually help the answer because like you played with Deftones, and that's like wow, I played with Deftones. So, but like a band that you were like, yeah, like I played with this band, and it could be any of them, anybody.
I mean, you know what? I will say this: playing with the Melvins, we've
Mm.
toured with the Melvins and played more shows with them than any band, and
Yeah.
like they are. It makes sense that they were the influence for like philosophically and musically for bands like Soundgarden and Nirvana and that whole scene, because they are doing the same thing they've done since like
Mm.
1982 when they started. They still drive themselves around. They still uh, only have like a small crew, but beyond that, watching them play, the chemistry that they have and their dedication to performing and just being like really just giving a shit. A lot of bands phone it in. I think I don't want to name any bands, but there's definitely bands that are older where you go see them, or it might be a reunion show of a band and it's disappointing and you kind of wish they didn't do it.
Mm.
The Melvins, I think, like is a band that like definitely still gives a shit about how they sound on stage and giving the audience their all. So I would say would be the most impressive band that I've had the chance to like see and play with on a regular basis.
Cool. A band or artist you listen to that may surprise people. I don't know if it's going to surprise people because you have a wide taste in music, but someone that like oh wow, Chris is into them or this
Ta-
artist.
Tame Impala.
Wow.
I
Mhm.
saw Tame Impala last week, and my wife didn't even know I was a fan. And like, I knew like every song and every word. Like, I do love a lot of dance music,
Mhm.
whether it's like trip hop or hip hop or just like DJ stuff. Like DJ Shadow, I walked out to DJ Shadow at my wedding
Oh,
with my
cool.
mother. So like there's a whole sort of like other aspect of my music taste that is like sort of in that sort of dancey sort of realm, if you will, and not just like
Cool.
rock music all the time.
Cool.
I would say this: I'm going to change my answer. People probably don't realize what a big fan I am of bands like Madball and Marauder
Mhm.
and like really heavy hardcore. And that I would say that is the most surprising thing when I talk to people that like I play in bands like Spotlights and On the Mighty Princes, and I don't listen to a ton of screamo music, and I don't listen to a ton of like post metal music. I You will likely find on my Spotify rap at the end of the year that I was listening to Madball or Agnostic Front or Cro-Mags or and I just like the aggression and the reality of that music, and that's sort of what I take from it, the anger and the aggression. Um, as far as like the style of music I play, I kind of take that energy and put it into that versus as
Mhm.
opposed to like playing music that sounds like that. But I really love I mean, I could sit here and sing along to like any song on fucking Set It Off, word for
Classic
word,
record.
and demonstrating my style.
Yeah,
And most people would probably find that bizarre, but I actually truly love that music. Crown of Thorns, like I love all that shit.
yeah.
So that's probably the most surprising thing for a lot of people is like, really, like you're in a band that sounds like Hum, or you're in a band that sounds like Smashing Pumpkins, or whatever, you know? And it's like, what do you listen to on the weekend? Like demonstrating my style. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably the most surprising answer you're gonna get out of me. So yeah,
So this is the last question here. What's your favorite new bands or bands you like that are
that are doing
past 5
stuff.
years or so? Mhm.
I really like this band Fontaines DC. They're pretty big at this point, and I think that they're kind of like they're doing like a cool thing that I used to be into bands like Interpol when that was all happening in like the early 2000s, and like not that they sound exactly like that, but it has a vibe that reminds me of that. Um, this is going to be really generic, but I'm a huge Turnstile fan. I think what they're doing is really
I
important,
like them a lot. New album's good.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm with
Um,
you.
there is a really great band from the UK called Bad Bad Not Good, and
Mhm.
they're sort of like a jazz trio, but they do collaborative stuff with like members of Wu-Tang and Turnstile, believe it or not, and it's sort of like music that you could rap over or sing over, and they're really good. Those are three bands off the top of my head that I really like that would be like within the past 5 years that I've been listening to a lot that are like contemporary. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. This is a great conversation, which I knew it would be with all your experiences and everything that you're involved in.
Thanks.
Anything before I sign us off here that you want to end with? I know you have a lot of stuff coming up with Spotlights and Orange 9 next year. With Ben, you got a lot of stuff. So anything you want to, talk about what's to come for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say again, thank you for doing this. As somebody that works in music and does podcasts, like, it should be stated that you are going out of your way to promote artists, and that's like a service to the community and to the scene that you and I come from. So,
Thank you.
thank you for doing that, and congrats on the new Overthrow record. I'm
Thank you.
planning on digging into it hard next week when I have to submit my review. So I'm looking
Cool.
forward to that. What I have coming up right now is Orange 9 millimeters touring with Bold in Florida. We're doing Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. Then Orange Nine is touring with Civ and Into Another in January. We're doing Brooklyn, Connecticut, and Philly. And then Spotlights is touring Europe all of February. And then Ben is playing at TVI on November 21st in Ridgewood, Queens. And we are working on other shows. And then I'm playing with Clockwise at the Massapequa VFW on December 6th, and Aerotype 11 is playing at the Middle East in Boston in January.
Mhm.
I think that's it.
I
That's a
think
lot.
that's awesome, man. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Chris, again, thank you so much. Just hang tight. I'm going to read this off and then I'll sign us off. Okay.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for listening to the What Lies Ahead podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. Go save the What Lies Ahead podcast playlist on Spotify that features all bands that were on the show. For more information on future episodes, you can go to my Instagram account and follow at What Lies Ahead _podcast and on Facebook by searching What Lies Ahead podcast. See you on the next episode.